You ever notice how some people can sit in a room full of screaming sports fans and feel absolutely nothing? No rush, no obsession, no "we won" or "we lost." And the weird part is, they're not miserable. They're calm, clear, almost untouchable. So what's the psychology of people who don't obsess over sports? Why do they stay so emotionally neutral while everyone else is riding a dopamine roller coaster? Let's decode it. 1. Their identity isn't borrowed. A lot of sports obsession isn't really about the game. It's about identity. When someone says, "we destroyed them," they're not just talking about a team. They're talking about themselves. Because psychologically, humans crave group identity. It's called social identity theory. You join a tribe, you wear the colors, you learn the chants, and suddenly you don't feel alone in the world. But people who don't obsess over sports often build identity differently. They don't borrow a ready-made badge. They build their self-image from skills, values, personal goals, or inner standards. So winning doesn't inflate them. Losing doesn't crush them, because their sense of self doesn't depend on something they can't control. They don't need a team to feel like they belong. They belong to themselves first. 2. They're less vulnerable to emotional contagion. Ever wonder why a crowd can make you feel emotions you didn't even have 5 minutes ago? One person screams, 10 people scream, and now your heart is racing and you don't even know why. That's emotional contagion. Emotions spread like a virus. Sports environments are basically emotional contagion machines. Music, noise, rivalry, social pressure. Your nervous system gets pulled into the group mood. But the people who don't obsess over sports tend to have stronger emotional boundaries. Not cold, not detached, just harder to hijack. They feel things, but they don't automatically absorb the room. This can come from emotional intelligence, self-awareness, the ability to notice, "I'm getting hyped, but do I actually care?" They don't confuse intensity with meaning. 3. They don't chase manufactured dopamine. Let's be honest, sports obsession is a perfectly designed dopamine loop. Anticipation, uncertainty, reward, pain, repeat. Your brain loves unpredictable rewards. It's the same reason people get addicted to gambling, doom scrolling, or refreshing for notifications. A close game is basically a dopamine casino. Every moment whispers, maybe something big is about to happen. But people who don't obsess over sports often get their dopamine elsewhere, from mastery, from creativity, from calm routines, from building something real. They're less drawn to high-arousal entertainment because their brain isn't starving for stimulation. And sometimes it's not even discipline, it's temperament. Some people are naturally lower in sensation-seeking. They don't crave chaos to feel alive. They'd rather feel steady than electrified. 4. They don't need safe conflict. Here's something most people don't say out loud. Sports is one of the safest ways to experience war without consequences. You bet rivalry, enemies, victory, humiliation, and you get to express aggression while still being socially acceptable. That scratches a deep psychological itch. Humans have a need for competition and dominance. Sports gives that need a costume. But people who don't obsess over sports often satisfy that need in other ways. They compete with themselves. They compete in their work. They train. They build. They learn. Or they simply don't need conflict to feel energized. And sometimes they avoid sports obsession because they're sensitive to emotional hostility. They don't enjoy the tribal anger, the trash talk, the us versus them vibe. They see how quickly it turns people into strangers, and they'd rather protect their peace than join a battle that isn't theirs. 5. They're less driven by social comparison. For many people, sports is also social currency. If you know the players, the stats, the drama, you can join conversations instantly. You can belong without revealing anything personal. Sports becomes a social shield, a safe topic, a way to connect without vulnerability. But people who don't obsess over sports often don't rely on that kind of social glue. They might be more comfortable with silence, more selective with relationships, more interested in depth than shared hype. And here's a big one. They're less controlled by social comparison theory. They don't constantly measure themselves through what the group approves of. So, if everyone is watching the match and they're not, it doesn't trigger panic. They don't feel behind socially. They don't feel like they're failing at being normal. They're okay being the outlier, because their self-worth isn't voted on by the crowd. So what does all of this mean? It doesn't mean sports fans are irrational, and it doesn't mean non-fans are superior. It means they're regulating meaning differently. Some people attach meaning to tribe, intensity, and shared emotion. Other people attach meaning to inner stability, autonomy, and personal purpose. And if you're someone who doesn't obsess over sports, you might not be boring. You might just have a nervous system that refuses to be rented out, a brain that prefers real control over emotional spectacle, and an identity that doesn't need a jersey to feel whole. If this felt a little too accurate, tell me in the comments, what do you think people misunderstand most about those who don't care about sports? And if you like psychology that quietly exposes human behavior like this, subscribe.